All right, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dave Roberts. I'm known as the Vision Warrior. Have a podcast, run this network and a couple of others. Love building community. Love helping entrepreneurs understand why they're on the planet, the value they provide, and if anything were possible, what their ideal day looks like. And so, if that inspires me, I'll become their Vision Warrior. I'll hook them up with the right people in the network to move them forward. So that's what I do. All right. Well, Randy, I'm going to let you give it back to you and have you introduce our mastermind leader today.
All right. Well, welcome to the Friday edition of Richardson Plano Networking. And we're going to connect to Mastermind with Ed Bogle. Is that correct, Ed?
Yes, that's
I got
correct.
it right. Great. And he's going to talk to us today about how to build competitive immunity. Now, I've never heard that phrase before, so I'm really excited
We
to
just made it up
hear
a
about
couple of
that.
weeks ago.
Well,
So
that's good. And
yeah.
you're going to tell us how to do that. Although we're all about collaboration, and every warrior has unique value, as we consider the volatile, uncertain, complex, and oftentimes ambiguous world we've survived over the last 2 years. It's clear that building a sustainable and profitable marketing advantage in a world that can change overnight is critical more than ever in 2022. During today's mastermind, Ed will lead participants in exploring strategies and tactics to improve their and our success. Ed Bogle is a strategic planning advisor working with and mentoring entrepreneurs to develop innovative solutions in market seizing strategy, implementation, brand execution, and capital sourcing. He's worked with and served as a coach, mentor to two of Inc. magazine's Entrepreneur of the Year regional winners and three of Inc. magazine's 100 fastest growing companies, from startups and emerging entities to the global 50 entrepreneurs. Building a real passion for entrepreneurship. His work includes platform development, alliances and partnerships, mergers and acquisitions, and capital formation. He also has a passion for nonprofits and social, purpose-driven entrepreneurship. He has helped numerous clients with the development of integrated web-based and social media strategies. He certainly has done a lot, and he doesn't look any less the wear for that, or any more the wear for that.
A lot of gray hair. A lot of gray hair.
There we go. Don't we all? RPNetworkers, Masterminds, Moderators, and leaders of this series have hundreds of years of success in all areas of business and life. They have been and are servant leaders willing to create a safe and impactful mastermind to those choosing to participate. Please join with me in welcoming Ed Bogle.
No, okay, don't need the applause. That's all right. This is a Zoom call. That's great. Let me just a little bit of set, because I'm the first time with this group. And I don't know how you like, David, you said leader of the mastermind, and Randy, you said speaker. So those are kind of two different animals to me. All right. So what I typically do, and I think what we planned on doing here, what we discussed, David, was me doing a brief intro and a little bit of how this competitive immunity thing came about and what's the thinking behind it, just to stir conversation. But with a small, intimate group like this, we'll just blast away with your questions. I don't know what your procedure is to call a question up, but I don't know if it's a raise your hand, push the button, hit the chat, whatever you guys want to do.
I'll manage that for you, Ed. So you can just go ahead and get it going, and I'll keep you keep the conversation.
And I think you can lead and speak both at the same time.
I'm going to try, because again, what I'm trying to do is stimulate a questions. I actually literally can teach a week-long class on this subject. So here you get the standard. I'm going to squeeze it down, and then rather than have you drinking from a fire hydrant, what I like to do is make the one or two critical points that we can talk about, but I'll take on any subject related to strategy and how you do it. That's been my career, 10 years corporately. And then subsequent to that, I was with Arthur Young, Ernst & Young, and built a lot of their strategy processes and worked with, in fact, it was the Southwest region based out of Houston. So I've done quite a bit of work in Texas. It's like a second home to me. So with that, can you turn the screen over to me so I can pop a few slides up here just to give you the context and the wording? If I just talk it doesn't work as well.
Yeah, you can share your screen.
Oh, I'm already there, huh? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
you should be able to share your screen.
Well, we will try this. How we doing so far?
We can see you.
My only problem is Jeff is in my, I've got to change the view, move the people faces around here. Crap. Because if I don't, I can't get to my one little taskbar block down there. Okay, if I go to help here, I'm not the world's biggest Zoom user. What's the view change? View. Okay. That didn't do it.
Yeah, actually, if you go to the bar at the very bottom of your PowerPoint and you can click on there you go.
Well, I had it covered up by I was trying to move the pictures of the people around. Okay.
There you go.
Can you all see that?
Yep.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. Greetings from my living room, because I physically could not get to my office today. It's up on a hill, and we've had ice, sleet, and then snow on top of that. And I think you guys have had a similar situation. So from the living room, here we go. Most people fear change, have trouble dealing with it. We live in a society, our business world, that so many of us just, as long as the P&L statement's looking pretty good, the balance sheet's looking pretty good, we have a tendency to pat ourselves on the back and keep going, okay? And then all of a sudden you get one of those black swan events, which we may be going through one here very quickly, very soon, with the world conditions and how that's going to pressure a lot of things, supply chain, pricing, everything under the sun. So it's a little bit of the world that we've developed and that we think is important is to embrace change. Don't fear it, embrace it. Change is your opportunity. You're stuck with it. But how can you flip that over and create sustainable, profitable, competitive immunity? By competitive immunity, I mean that you are so good at innovation and branding. And David would, is one of the sources, telling your story, cutting through all the clutter that's out there is critical to develop and, really push your brand out there in your target markets. So incidentally, I'm wide open. If you want to interrupt me and ask a question, we can do that. If not, I'll just keep plowing for a little bit and then I'm going to stop and let's go to questions. Okay. So I love this slide. I love entrepreneurs. Are there any entrepreneurs in the group today? I mean, basically, I assume all of you are pretty much entrepreneurs in your own rights, your own respect. So all entrepreneurs have a disease called love. We have a tendency to fall in love with our products and services, and we continue to develop and push, and things start sliding a little bit. We push harder for better, incremental changes in those products and services. And then, we inch up and then we come back down, we inch up. It's a cycle that's very tough in today's world. And by that love, we get seduced by the potential of our products and services. And we spend more time, pushing products and services than we do what matters most to us. And that's giving the ideas the best chance to fly. What is our market segment? And it really, how are we improving it and how do we innovate that over time? That's basically the point I want to get across. There's 3 examples up there: Segway, BlackBerry, and Kodak. All 3 of them were enamored with their products and services, and they're really not around very much, or they had to make massive shifts. You look at Kodak, they thought 35 millimeter or whatever it is film that was utilized for a lot. This digital stuff isn't that good. It's not that good. We won't have the digital just isn't going to replace us. Well, guess what? There was a company out of Houston that I did a bunch of work for that Oh, they did a consolidation play, bought 19 different companies around the country, printing firms. All of them were real high-end printers, had the big Heidelberg presses that can cost $3, $4, $5 million. Real high quality, but they had the same problem. They said it wasn't going to happen.
What
Well,
would you want us to take away?
hello? Okay. I just heard a little noise there. So their problem they ran into is they kept saying, well, the market, you know, it's just not that good a quality. We're the better printers. We're the better printers. But digital was so much cheaper that the market finally said, you know, digital is acceptable and it's so much cheaper. They lost 75% of their EBITDA by the time I got a phone call and said, hey, you know, and you know, we need some help here. We need to refocus this. Okay. And so a lot of this has to do with more than a love of your product. And that's where we get problems. We get in love with our product and how we push it, how we tweak it and all of that. You're better off if you understand and develop a love for your customer. And I don't know of anybody that does that any better than Apple. Okay. They're focused on their customer. Their devices are just a way to facilitate that. In fact, in 2003, Steve Jobs said, we have no interest in the cell phone business at all. And they still don't believe they're in the cell phone business. The cell phone is a device for them in which to communicate. So they're looking at the customers and how they're improving their communications, their connectivity, etc. So again, our focus is historically in business. It's the money, it's the profits and that kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, profits are like breathing. Without them, you cease to exist. But what we need to understand better is how we get it. How do we derive that, which makes customers buy? So a few basic premises under which we're operating today. You know, how many of you believe that the conditions you operate under today will be the same 3 years from now? Nobody's raises their hand ever when I ask that question. Okay, you just admitted as a CEO, part of your job is Chief Change Officer, the CCO. Okay, and managing change becomes a real daunting task. Second thing is, do you have more clutter or less clutter in your life, primarily as a result of the web, the internet? Less clutter or more clutter? It is typically, you know, more clutter is the answer to that I typically get. Well, so the question becomes, is in that clutter, to cut through that clutter, is the brand experience, your products and services, and how you present them more important or less important? It's obviously critically more important. The other thing we've got working on us right now is a demographic shift too. You know, I can't remember the exact numbers, don't hold me to it, but I think it's 2028 that the millennials will be 65 to 70% of the workforce in this country. And they're definitely a different kind of buyer. I'll get into that in a minute. So if you're not shifting with that demographic, you're not shifting with your target, you're going to miss it and basically potentially have yourself disappear as a company. So it's this demographic also has gone beyond simple functionality. They want a brand experience. They want an emotion. And that holds true on the employment side also. You know, they don't want to go to work for a company where I've got a job description and I check off those boxes every day and then I go home. They want to be a part of the team. They want to participate in the development of the company. They want to feel that esprit de corps, that part of we've done it, we've achieved it. So there's a lot of shifts going on that you have to really look at. So here's my number one. If you don't learn anything else today, try this one on. Strategy in running a company is more about a focus on value creation than a focus on profits. Profits are a result of value creation. The higher the value, the greater the margins, very obviously. The key to doing value creation is market segmentation. I'm sure you all have heard that, had it pounded into your brains for years, is what is the key to that? It's the segmentation. The tighter the segment, the greater I can create the value. I had a client once I asked him, who is your target segments? And he said, El Mundo. And for those of you that don't speak Spanish, that's the world. And those of you that do speak Spanish, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's true. It's the world. And I said, well, okay, well, how are we targeting? Who are we going after? The world's a big place. I got one salesperson sitting out in the lobby, which is a great question to ask yourself. I got one person sitting out in the lobby as a salesperson. Where do I send them first and why? So get down to that segmentation. And then survival and profitability is more about innovation. It's the change in your value over time. You've got to change your value over time. You sit still long enough, you're going to get displaced by a competitor. In fact, interesting statistic I saw the other day, 52% of the Fortune 500 does not exist 30 years later. Okay, companies are disappearing because they don't innovate, they don't change. And, you know, we can get into legend examples of that. So, and none of that in today's world works without an engaged team. Culture and leadership become much more important. Even if you're a solopreneur, you've got alliances, you've got partnerships and that kind of stuff. How do you engage with that team? You guys are really, you know, on this call are all potential team members to each other. You share thoughts and ideas. How do we engage? And internally, if you've got you know, employees, and I don't care if it's 1 or 100, what's the culture in our company? Are we really building a culture that's conducive to our, you know, putting our stuff out there? So it becomes, you know, really a task of culture and leadership. So let me speak real briefly to, so your world has changed. The internet is now how they authenticate brands. And you know, David, I look forward to looking your stuff up and maybe even having a conversation with you in the near term future, because the way we tell our stories, the way we get our stuff across, the podcast, all of the stuff we're putting out on social media has to be really well done. And it has to cut through the clutter. And I'm going to do something in a minute with you guys on that, the clutter cutting. Competitors can appear in a nanosecond. So you get we're now in a period where there's compression of business cycles. Brand longevity is not as long as it used to be. You know, we're not growing companies anymore, and they're lasting for 50 years, 60 years. Even, you know, you even look at our automobile manufacturers. I was doing a presentation the other day, and I got into where are there industry examples of people that didn't make the shift. The auto industry in this country used to own 60% market share. Guess what they're up to now? 14, or down to. They own 14% of the world car market because they sat still long enough, and all of a sudden we had an oil crisis in the mid-70s that drove the price of gasoline way up, which we may experience another one of those here shortly. And the Japanese manufacturers entered the US first with very cheap automobiles, and while the US was trying to catch up with cars like Pinto, these people migrated upstream into more of the luxury models, to the point now where the whole complex of who's competing in what countries is very complex. But share of market, you know, US auto manufacturers lost a very world dominant position because they wouldn't change. They wouldn't change how they built cars. So this new millennial generation is much more information savvy. They're much more about the brand experience and the purpose. You hear a lot about user interface, user experience, that kind of stuff. It's critically important. But a lot of that interface and experience has migrated to the web too. And so if people are throwing up websites, and when I talk about in particular web types of presence, a lot of them, if you've got a website that says home, about us, products and services, yada, 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 out to contact us, you probably have a poor website because you're not getting across your disruption, what it is. When they land on your web page, what's going to get them disrupted that will cause them to engage. So they're looking for also to, you know, you got to disrupt them to get them engaged. Then you get into the whole brand experience and that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, our future is fraught with the only constant being change. So it's not a question, and there's an awful lot of stuff about change management out there and that kind of stuff. I'm talking more about, and this is an entrepreneurial based thing, it's more about how I can migrate that over time and build it. So my mantra is don't aim for today's trends. A slightly better strategic advantage. That's what everybody tries for. Those advantages are fleeting. They don't last long, that kind of thing. You've got to aim for what the world needs tomorrow. And if you're a solopreneur out there and you're selling products for another company, push them for what is out there. Push for your target client base and what you can do to add value to the services you're putting out there. Aim for what the world needs tomorrow, innovation and competitive immunity. Because if you innovate, that leads you to the competitive immunity. So let me talk briefly about that. Any fans out there of the old Far Side cartoon series? This is one of my all-time favorites. Yeah.
I gotta check
Thank
that
you,
out,
Marco.
Max.
And you know, this is back to what is it you call it, David? Warrior
versus zombie.
Warriors versus zombie. Well, this is kind of my version of that. Okay. If you're going to go out there and fight in the world, because this cartoon really brought it home. Hey, they're lighting their arrows. Can they do that? You know, and this was a way they used to circle the covered wagons to, you know, fend off an attack. They had the rifles, the opponents had the arrows. And so the opponents started lighting their arrows and burning their protection down. Okay. So it's that shift that causes you to have to shift in your thinking. So you need to learn how to light your arrows. What are the arrows we're lighting inside of our company? And what does that look like over a period of time? So this came from a book called Competing for the Future. Hamill and Prahalad wrote it. I think they were Harvard professors, but anyway, it's kind of a matrix of how you look at your core competencies, what you're offering in the market and the market itself. And that lower left quadrant, you know, you migrate out to the other three quadrants, and you do that over a period of time. And I'll talk real briefly about that in a second. And don't go buy the book on Competing for the Future. It is about that thick, and it's like reading War and Peace. It's really long, but it's one of my Bibles that I've drawn a lot of inspiration on how to build these things. So here's kind of the rub of what you need to do when you're developing your stuff. Look at your current, you know, down there in the lower left quadrant, you've got existing markets, existing competencies, okay? So you've got your current position, your current capabilities, okay? And that's the center of what you're going to do. Now, that lower left quadrant is where 85% of your revenues over the next year are probably going to come from, okay? It takes a while to shift out into other things. But the first thing you want to leverage, if you've got good core competencies, you've got good differential value, what other markets can I take that to? The leverage piece there. Then the other piece is well, okay, as I've got my existing markets, what else can I find, look for, sell success stories about, find coaches, build into my current capabilities into other markets? And then the upper right quadrant, that's where the future rests. That's where I really want to expand and grow. That's where competitive immunity comes from. Build what they need in the future. And don't be afraid to do that, even if you're a small entrepreneurial company. In fact, that's what gives entrepreneurial companies an advantage. By the time you show up on the radar screen of a big competitor or whatever, you're already going to have established market share. I had a tech company here in Tulsa that built the first ever database-driven 100% electronics claims processing for the medical world. And somebody a minute ago mentioned they were in the medical community. And these guys really did with, you know, electronic claims 100%. It really reduced the amount of paper and that kind of stuff. And they had lost about 250 million, no, excuse me, I'll say that right in a minute, $25 million of loss over the first 3 years of their operation off of about $2.5 million in revenue, total revenues. So they had a tremendous amount invested in the software and the development of it and that kind of stuff, but they were scattered over 19 markets they didn't target. That was the problem. So again, what we finally got them to do was focus on the large hospital market. They grew to about 60% of large hospital market, sold that company for in excess of $100 million. and, absolutely barnstormed the market because they found out that the hospital market had the biggest need and would be accepting of their products. They finally sold the company to National Data Corporation, NDC. So it's a lot about, I'm going to skip a couple of slides here because I want to get down to your questions, your interactions. So all brands you've got to disrupt, okay? You have to disrupt before they can engage. And your web page should follow this kind of formatting, all right? Then I've got wireframes and stuff. I've got a lot of stuff I can share with you. I'll get down to that at the end here, or the end of our conversation. But you've got to disrupt. You've got to have a clear reason for them to listen to you. What's disruptive? If you kind of sound like everybody else, they're going to move on. The average person spends 5 to 7 seconds on a website. 5 to 7 seconds, because they don't find immediately what they're looking for, they move on. Even if you're great at SEO and get yourself to the top of the page, and that's gotten so complex, you really need professionals to help you do that. But if I don't disrupt them, I'm not going to engage them. So if you want, again, this was a small group and I want to get to your questions, but just take a second and think about what is the most disruptive thing? What is clearly different about what you do versus all the other people, David, that produce videos for people, that produce those storytelling? What is the real difference? Take 5 minutes, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever, and write down what you think is the most disruptive phrase. Oftentimes I ask clients to answer this. We're not publishing, so what is the most outrageous claim you can make about your product or your service at the end? What is clearly different about what you do? Why should people, what is it that's so valuable that they want to buy that? Does anybody got a share off of that they want to do? Somebody want to talk about that?
Dressel, you had a question.
Yeah, and I'm hearing what Ed's saying right now, and actually I'm trying to think through for what I do, because I'm kind of like a financial advisor. I'm kind of regulated on how much I can throw out to shock value.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, can you give me an example of something you've heard in a specific industry so I can get my mind wrapped around it?
In terms of the financial industry?
No, not just any industry. Like what would be what you would call a disruptive thing that they did that worked in the automotive industry, for example, like you've been giving as an example.
Yeah, the automotive industry, in terms of innovation, really came in the design side of it. Okay, and then it's what the Japanese did, and back in 1975, they put up an ad that had 3 large tank farms, big tanks in a tank farm. And they had a Datsun B210. And if anybody ever owned one of those, it was pretty much a disposable car. They weren't the greatest in the world, but the headline to the ad said 28 miles per gallon. That's all it said. Okay. And that's how they introduced and came into this country. So the disruption there, I'm not sure that's the greatest example. My early career, I was a banker. And in fact, that bank, we developed all sorts of regional plans. It's known as Bank of Texas in Texas. And the first thing we did was, when I took over as a marketing strategy director, my challenge was people were moving out of the downtown area into the mixed use suburbs. How in the hell do I slow that down? Well, we discovered these little things called ATMs, automated teller machines, right? It's commodity now. Everybody's got them. But back then, nobody had them. 40 banks out of the entire 12,000 banks in the United States even had one. And most of those were in a vestibule where you could kick cobwebs off of it. So we looked at that as a part of a delivery system. And long story short, we built that into the rebranding of the bank, the change of the name of the bank, and also the whole service. That started a whole tumble down over the next 2 years of redoing all of the services. So we disrupted with a new way of doing banking. And we had to really spend some money because those of you that were around back then would remember, we didn't have even desktop computers at that point. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have all these other things. So it was really disruptive to do that. I don't know if those are great examples. I could go on forever.
Ed, can a
Yeah, that was
guarantee
good.
can
That
a
was good.
guarantee be a disruption?
Can a guarantee be a disruption? Absolutely. Okay. But be careful, because guarantees are not necessarily defensible. That's the other side of a good disruption. It's got to be defensible. In other words, it can't be, you know, it can't be something. That thing flashed across the screen there. I didn't know what that meant. But anyway, if it's easy replicable, I can use an
Well,
example.
I can guarantee 3 stages if somebody joins at the $300 level.
Uh-huh.
Is that a disruption?
If it's not easily replicatable.
Well, nobody else is making promises like that.
Okay, it's probably a clear disruption.
Okay,
Jeff, it depends on, you know, will it stand over time? And I hope you've thought through what the next phase of it is. And I'm sure you have, that you're migrating your programs over time. So, you know, the whole disruption thing is, you've got to clearly do it. And it can be a variety of things. It can be people, it can be time, speed, efficiency, you know, but the harder it is to replicate, the longer it will stand up, obviously. Anybody got any other thoughts about disruption? Questions?
I will. Ed, can we lose the screen share? Can you just
Sure.
end your screen share? That way we can see, I can see the grid better.
Did that do it?
Yep, you're perfect. I just wanted to get, rather than do that to you. So thinking about being disruptive, Ed's question, and Jeff offered one possible disruptor is guarantees, where guarantees aren't necessarily offered by your competition, if you will. What other things in each of your worlds? I know Ed comes out of the large corporate space, kind of like I do, so we tend to talk about companies. You just need to translate that into your business, whether you're a solopreneur or an entrepreneur. But what would you see is a disruptor in your world right now, or in your strategy? Is kind of the question I think he's got on the table. Anybody? David, go ahead.
Yeah, don't talk to the group, talk to the individual. And what I mean by that is like social proof. I think you mentioned that is, if you're using stories, that tends to be like, for me, like I'm answering your question, therefore you can leverage that as a way, an opportunity to kind of just showcase social proof that whatever you're selling works when I'm talking good about you, right? That tends to be a very easy way to just kind of catch fire when someone else is talking about your product rather than yourself.
Yeah, David, would you say it's a lot of that's the emotional connection too?
Yeah.
People want to be emotionally connected to your brand. And what you do.
Yeah, and that's the more of that attachment of like seeing themselves in you, right? So, and if people can see themselves in that, then it's a lot simpler to narrate and guide them to the next steps, because you can't point out people's problems. Yeah, you know, like when you disrupt them, it's creating a sense of friction of some form of conflict. So you can either go against their own beliefs, because most people aren't aware, like 95% of people aren't aware of their actual problem. Only you do. So how do you break those barriers? It's help them see themselves in other people. That's why David does a podcast. They can see themselves in him, right? On his audience. And the cool thing about what he does is that he changes and has a new guest every week. That's why it's something long-term that you can do consistently, because it's not just seeing David talking to his audience. It's him interviewing someone. So each week there's a different form of a different story. It's the same message, just in different angles.
Right. Okay, Michael, you want to, did you have an example or?
Yeah, actually I had a thought. Actually, it's against my business right now. So those that have had a face-to-face with me know that I used to be at Blockbuster Video. And if there's ever a company that didn't understand disruption of Netflix, it was Blockbuster Video. And now I've got a competitor out there that is doing a great job on Facebook of marketing a particular product similar to what Ed is talking about. It's called Sana, S-A-N-A, and I just lost a deal yesterday to it. So with that, you can get disrupted, but it's how you kind of approach it. So I'm like, okay, what has Santa got that I have not got in my repertoire? And so now I'm actually doing research on how I can provide something similar or even reach out to them. So I don't want to be a blockbuster video. I want to listen to the disruption and try to adjust and move forward with it rather than trying to fight it.
Michael, I've got the contact for the Santa down in Austin. I will
Okay.
get it over to you.
All right, sounds good.
Ed, did you have any response or thoughts on that?
On the
On what Michael was saying in terms
yeah,
of just a competitor. I think the real point there is he's awakened to a competitive threat, and he's now having to kind of process that. How do you, my question would be kind of connecting those dots. One of the things you said that I think was pretty powerful is it's kind of like, you know, Gordie Howe used to say, I think it was Gordie Howe that, you know, said you skate to where the puck is going, not where it is. You don't chase it. So when you look at a competitive disruptor that maybe has disrupted your model a little bit, what do you do with that?
you got to leapfrog. Okay. And by that, I mean, and he's doing the right things. Michael, you know, go after it, tear apart what they're doing and figure out what your niche is. Okay. And again, going back to segmentation, when I work with companies that are on the, you know, that we're actually doing turnarounds on, one of the first things we do is we go into this model called SQUIRM, which is SQIRM. It doesn't have the U in it. And the S stands for segment. So in your thinking, think a lot about the segment. Who am I trying to deal with here? What does my customer look like? What is their both psychographic? What is their demographics? What's the emotional connection? What's going to bring them to this brand? What is the competitor missing out in terms of that connection? And where can we fill that gap? And it may be bringing in an alliance partner, like you said. You know, it's a lot of, I'm a big fan of alliance partners. In fact, I like lean types of operations, lean types of business building. And one of the great ways to grow a firm, to grow a solopreneur type deal, is to look at your alliance partnerships and actually use them to help you develop what might be that clear differential. Because if you can build those alliance partnerships, you've got some strength that's hard to overcome. I don't know if that got to what you were thinking, David, but
yeah, no, that's good. I mean, that's what I'm saying is I think I'm kind of I know you weren't part of our mastermind last week, but one of the things we were kind of looking at is current trends, you know, financial. You know, we weren't even talking about the threat of war last week, but you know, and you know, on the others, but there are things that are ahead of us, and as entrepreneurs, we can, you know, we have the ability to make changes and move from the quadrant that you described, which is our existing market, our existing capabilities, and either move up in that or, you know, right or left more nimbly, I think, than our competition, and be disruptive. It's one of the things that one of the reasons why I'm, you know, investing in, you know, and working with the Be Connected platform that we're doing is because it's global, it's going after, and it's disruptive to the current thinking of ways these platforms are done. I don't want to necessarily get into that, but I mean, I think that is a key component of that. So anybody who else has some thoughts about, you know, somebody like Mako or whatever. Mako joined us after we did the introductions, but Mako is a a printer. He's here. Nobody comes close. He's a great guy. Mako, do you have any thoughts about? Because I know you've done some things that were somewhat disruptive in terms of things when like we were going through the yard signs, some of that kind of stuff that come to my mind.
Well, when Ed first talked about how he was working with those companies, those big press companies. I was in the middle of all that but from a smaller press perspective, and I saw a lot of those big companies go out of business because they wouldn't, embrace the new technology that was out there. I remember when Max came on board and our typesetter said, nobody's going to accept that 300 DPI crap. And next thing I know, they were out of business within a year. And same happened to a lot of these big presses. Right now, the new technology that's come into play beyond digital is now inkjet printing. That's starting to come to the forefront and taking the place of offset printing. Lots of times now you can't tell whether something's been done on a Heidelberg, on a desktop printer now, because the technology is so advanced. And that's what I'm scrambling to do is I can't afford, to be honest with you, in my little print shop to stay on top of the new equipment that comes out. And that's why I've done like what Ed's talking about of creating alliances with bigger shops that have these presses.
Sure.
And I send my work to them for the bigger runs and everything. And that's what's worked out for me from my perspective.
Well, it sounds like you're doing the service side of it very well. So that I will cut the story back to about a paragraph or less here, but when I was in college, my buddy of mine and I, fraternity brothers, bought a small printing shop there in Stillwater. And I didn't look at it from the standpoint of how could I compete with the other print shops around there. It was, well, okay, how can I win? And what we did, and I keep in mind, this was early 70s, I guess, we provided the service level. I lived in a fraternity house with 70 guys. I looked at that as a delivery system. And we'd pick it up, bring it to the shop, print it, bring it back to you. And we got all the merchants in town. And when we had the bigger jobs, like you said, Mako, we found the others. So a lot of times you can take a product that's somewhat of a commodity or highly competitive, change the whole service perspective, the connection to the people. Go find 2 or 3 people that can help you better design their print, work with them on a better quality product that improves their product or whatever you're printing them for. That's great stuff. Stay on that service side if you can.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but
Yeah, one of the things, Ed, what you said is, in saying it a little differently, the technology will come in and take a lot of times maybe the low end part of your market, just like David Aguirre, who took something that I could probably do myself, but he has the experience and the capabilities, just like Mako can do the printing. And even though maybe I can get this that quality, maybe there's a certain, like I think what you're saying is there's a service market there to not try and continue to make somebody dependent on your company for the more commodity-like things that you're providing, because now all of a sudden they can get it on an inkjet printer as opposed to offset printing, and the cost of providing that component may be less for the end consumer. But then how do you elevate the relationship with clients that, in Mako's case, I know for certain is people who are very loyal? You've still got that existing client base that you've become, but maybe take them on a journey to maybe provide the higher end of that and value that they can't do for themselves, like just putting together, for example, I'm kind of connecting the dots with David taking the things that he can do with video, which I do video editing, but not to the level that he does, and take his expertise, his eye, his vision, his artistic emphasis, and do something that I couldn't do for myself. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So Ed, who else has? I know Randy, you had your mic open a minute ago. Is there a?
Well, the only comment that I was thinking about was Michael's dilemma, and of course part of his constraint is that he's in a highly regulated industry, and B, in a company that they used to think that probably that was a competitive advantage for them. So not only does he have to figure out what this other company is doing, but he has to figure out how he can not only implement what they're doing, but leapfrog it and get it through his company blessed, so that he's not an outlier within his own company or get fired. So he's really got a challenge. But the good news is that he's facing it head on, and he's going to tackle it. He's going to figure it out, and I'm sure that he will come up with a great answer that will get past all the gates internally that the customers will want.
Right.
Well, and Randy, the best freedom you can have is having your own business. Then you can do what you want to do as long as it is within the regulations.
Right, that's right.
What you need to do.
Yep. That's it.
Yeah, but Michael, a lot of it obviously in your business is the service level and the connectivity. And I've actually consulted some financial advisory firms, okay? And we actually worked with a lot of the clients and consolidated kind of what's the future, here's what they need, and help us build that, going back to the corporate entity. I don't know exactly what your situation is, but and it's a little bit of, it's more than lunches and country club golf outings and that kind of stuff. Everybody does those, but it's where do you add value?
Plus it's also integrity. I mean, he works for a company that is known for their integrity, and he, as an individual, has an enormous amount of personal integrity. And so people know if I work with Michael and he's introducing a new product, that it's backed by a company with a high degree of integrity, and if he's selling it, it must be good, and I should listen.
Yeah. And I hear what Michael, that obviously trust is an enormous part of your business, and if you ever violate that, you're basically out of business. So the other thing I encourage people to look at is what surrounds all of that, okay? And how can I do an information stream of things that might surround that? For example, maybe a lot of people like to invest in real estate deals. I don't know if you have the freedom to bring in other people to talk about subject matter and provide information, but if you become that information source for other things that surround their decisions, because obviously is it a personal financial product? I assume you're in a personal financial stream.
No, it's a medical insurance product for a company. And
okay. You said that earlier. I forgot. I'm
That's
sorry.
Right. That's right.
Well, boy, is there a lot surrounding the medical world today, and maybe your company provides an awful lot of information that's valuable that other people don't provide. So, it's just, where can you add value? When I was with that bank and I was in essence their marketing, I don't even remember what my title was. I was vice president, director of strategy and market development, I guess, something like that. And anyway, I had an advertising agency, and I sent every advertising person that wanted to come see me directly, I sent them away because I didn't want to see them. I had an ad agency. Go see the ad agency. Well, I can't get anywhere with those people. Well, sorry about that. They are the ones that are my filter, and you're going to have to deal with them. And but there was one lady who was one of the local television stations representative, and she always sent me something or brought me something of value. And I've never discussed directly with her exactly, what our media buys were going to be, etc. what I did do is I had lunch with her once in a while. I enjoyed her commentary and her perspective on the community. And we developed a program with her and her content people about the city, its history, and some other things, and wildly successful. So she helped me, I helped her. See how the connection to something there was going on? Anyway, I'll shut up.
Hey, Don, did you have a question or a comment?
Well, and I think in the real estate business, we do this a lot where we hook people up with others that can provide services that the customer doesn't really know about or trust that they're going to be able to find people with integrity to do work for them on their own. And so, you know, that's one of the things. Alliance, you mentioned Alliance Partners. And that's something that we do pretty routinely. The problem with that is, in my world, is those people tend to be flaky sometimes, and you don't know it,
Yeah.
or they turn flaky eventually, and that's a real issue. But that's one thing we do a lot, and it helps. And I'd like to team up with attorneys because I like to do the front end of the transactions. And the attorney is an integral partner for me because I can't give legal advice. So, but I can give business advice when we're reviewing a lease, for example, in the commercial world. And so, that kind of partnership works well.
It's a tough. You primarily in commercial markets?
I do only commercial now.
Okay.
Yeah. But I try to focus on small businesses, because they're the ones that need the most help. And there's nobody out there that does what I do that I run into routinely.
What's unique about you, out of curiosity?
My contract background from my IT perspective, because I spent a lot of years in IT and spent millions and millions and millions of dollars buying software and reviewing contracts and all kinds of things with one of your former employers. Actually, E&Y was one of our consultants for many years. So
I hope they were good.
They were.
On certain days they were, right? You can be honest.
Well, we spent $20 million with them, or not with them, but on the project, and threw it away. So yeah.
Ooh, that's an IT project.
Yeah. That's right.
I as a partner of Ernst & Young, I got to write a rather large check for my portion of the settlement of a lawsuit, actually originated out of Texas. And it was, no, it wasn't. It was Kansas. It was Hallmark Cards. And they did an IT project with them, flipped the switch, and Hallmark was shut down for about a week and a half. So I lost them as a consulting client also because of the IT. I know what you're talking about, painful stuff. But one quick point that came to mind there that, and I think you're already doing this, it sounds like it, Michael, what is the pain points? What is painful about that whole process? And even if it's not me, who can I bring in that helps make that easier and take some of the pain out of that? Same thing over on, other financial advisory services.
Speaking of other financial advisory services, Karen Burkholder is here. She's also in the insurance space. But she is doing some things, I think, to improve her competitive immunity and some of the things that she started to do. And since she didn't get a chance to introduce herself, I wanted to make sure she was engaged in this discussion. So, Karen, did you have anything you wanted to share or run by Ed while we're here?
Well, I know on the mentorship group with the insurance agency, they keep saying niche down, niche down, niche down. Well, I'm looking at what I do as my client being seniors, any 55 and older. And I want to make sure to protect all their assets, because what I'm finding in once they get into the Medicare space, they need help on all their insurance plans, not just making sure their Medicare is taken care of. And so I was just wondering, on your perspective, it's like, I'm saying anybody who fogs a mirror that's over 55 is my niche. And they're saying, no, you've got to get down, you've got to drill down. What are some of your ideas and thoughts on that.
Well, being a Medicare person and knowing that process, it's a painful process. And I'm sorry, but I get 8 million emails and text messages a day about, oh, save you money, 0 premiums, yada, yada, yada. And how do I trust that? I can't trust that. So where's the trusted resource?
Right. And then that was why I put together
You got a book?
My legacy planner. And so right now I'm up to Mako and see if he can get a better deal. Right now it's like I'm looking at those self-publishing companies, but if Mako, if you've got a direct thing, I'd rather run it through you than try to figure out the printing thing. But yeah,
I was on the
book.
I was on the board of directors of a nonprofit here in Tulsa that's called Life Senior Services. And I actually convinced them to develop they have an annual review your, stuff, although they've kind of shut that down or shrunk it down because, the potential problems with licensure requirements. You're not a licensed agent, you can't give advice. So,
exactly. And I've told several people that it's like, you can't tell them, it depends on the person. So you can't tell them, no, don't do this. You're not a licensed agent. You can be held accountable.
Yeah. And so it's, so they kind of had to back off of that, but the concept was still there. You're a licensed agent, right? So therefore, what you can provide them is just, share a perspective. Do you do reviews for people? That's a great entree because it is hell on wheels and most insurance providers don't mess with Medicare. Correct?
And yes, and the ones that don't do the home and auto. And I'm looking at seniors who haven't looked at their home and auto insurance. And the next tornado, they can't rebuild their 2,000 square foot home. They'll get a 1,500 because they haven't changed their dwelling policy in 18
I like the niche.
Yeah.
It's disruptive. What's that brand promise? What's that one thing you tell a senior? It's a tough question. I don't need to put you on the spot.
It's a matter. I protect their legacy because the insurance products protect their legacy. So that's why I named it my legacy planner. And I renamed the byline to the blank so they can fill in the blank of their family name, family emergency manual.
Are you fee-based? Is that what you are?
It's commission-based. So
it's commission-based. Okay.
Commission-based. And now we have to do the full disclosure of how much we make. And then, but, I just say, I don't get paid unless you buy a product, but if my product doesn't work for you, that's fine. Just refer me to somebody else.
And you can't cross borders, can you? State borders?
I do have some non-resident license. Okay. So I can do some. I just added Oklahoma. So,
we need help up here.
Well, which state?
You folks in Texas have known that for years, though.
He's in Oklahoma. Karen.
Oh, okay. Well,
you guys can tee up a 1-to-1. I wanted to bring Dawn on because Dawn just has endured some surgery and stuff. She didn't get a chance to introduce herself. And Dawn is a franchise owner and has great service in the educational space with tutors and stuff. So I wanted number one, just to have her hear her voice. And also if you had anything to comment or offer on the subject or question, Dawn.
Thank you, Ed. That was a great presentation. For me, what made me think about the disruption was social proof and emotional connection. That's an avenue that's easier for me for my business dealing with children because we tutor pre-K all the way up to college. So I like that avenue to do that for as far as something different and disrupting. Go on that emotional connection or go to that social proof that we've made a difference. We do one-on-one, sure. We go to the home as opposed to a center, different things like that. So I like that avenue.
Sure. It's you know, the whole educational curriculum thing's always a challenge. So you tutor in individually, one-on-one
Yes.
type of situations? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And we'll go anywhere, to their soccer game, their meet them at Starbucks, wherever they want to tutor. Mostly it's in the home. So it's one-on-one, as opposed to most of the centers are group. They're a small group, 2 or 3 kids, but yeah, that's our difference.
Is it, and you said it was a franchise?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. I've done a lot of work in the franchise business. So if you ever have any questions, my contact information's up there. I'd be happy to share whatever perspectives, because the franchise business is a tough business in this world today. Any of you that are sitting out there thinking about, I might want to go franchise, really understand what the laws are. It's a state by state issue. And back in the early 2000s, there were people just throwing franchises out left and right, but they really didn't build the business and the training underneath it, you know, and they had people put their life savings into these franchises and then it'd go under.
Mm.
And so state by state by state, they got sued to the point where if you're going to franchise across the entire United States, you probably are having to file tax returns in every state as a franchisor.
Wow.
And what they don't do enough of is listening to and working with their franchisees about how to get the product out there. And what I encourage franchisees to do is add value on top of the franchise. And where can you do that? And, you know, in building that, can you go and take your product into where you can reach more people easier? And I don't know if that's in the model or not, but for example, we had some stuff in early childhood reading. In fact, I'd love to connect you to that one at one point in time, if that's of interest, if it's not provided by your franchisor, because 2/3 of the kids in this country can't read at grade level by the 3rd grade. And it's been that way for 50 years. And the ramifications of that are enormous. Yes. So, you know, do you have, is there a reading component to what you do?
Yes, we mostly just go in and, you know, help with whatever they're having a problem with, that kind of thing. But we do have a pre-K program, and it is, you know, mostly reading and writing based.
Yeah, the problem is the way we've traditionally taught reading, it doesn't work.
I agree. As a teacher, I agree. I was a 3rd grade teacher for 13 years. I totally agree.
You know what I'm talking about then.
Yes.
That was painful as all get out. I served on a school board here locally, and that was one of the pain points that our superintendent summarily just ignored. And I was a real thorn on his side. When I had to term out and could no longer be in it, he got angry. But look at that. I'd love to connect with you on the whole reading thing and just show you some stuff. Maybe even your franchisor might be interested in it, because trying to get into the public school systems with any kind of program, you might as well go beat your head against a brick wall until it's bloody. Well,
it sounds like she hit a hot button there for you, Ed, in terms of education. Yeah. I'm also a big proponent of education as well. I wanted to get Ricky Jean Wright. We've got some diversity in this group. So Ricky is credit card processing, as well as a singer-songwriter. Actually wrote the theme song to my podcast, and I wanted him to have, he always has something of value to add. He's a core member of the group and the mastermind. So, and Dawn, it's great to hear your voice and see you on the mastermind again. She's always a great add to the group. So Ricky, any thoughts from your end? You've been kind of quiet.
Well, one of the things that I'm reminded all the time is that no matter what strategies we have in business, we can never forget about the number one way that I get my best business, and the number one way that my wife, who's been a banker for 30 years, gets her business, is by referral. Mm-hmm. If we don't have a stream of referrals coming in, no matter what we do in our strategies, we're just fighting upstream. And I've had people to call me from being a manufacturer's representative for 21 years. They still call me and ask me what I'm doing. And And if I was, you know, they'd like to do business with me just because we had a relationship. My wife is at home recovering from reconstructive foot surgery, and someone called her on her cell phone this morning, which she'd been doing business with for all this 30 something years. And they needed to get a loan for their business. And so I think that sometimes we think referrals are old fashioned, and all the new technology and stuff gets our name all over the internet and everything. But the plain old, I've done a good job for somebody and they refer me to somebody else, or they come back again for more business, is gold. And I see that all the time.
Well, thanks, Ricky. That's good. I realize we're about 4 minutes to landing the plane, and I wanted to give the floor back to Ed, and for everybody participating and the new folks here and everything. I appreciate everybody being here. Actually, I'm going to come back to you after I thank Ed for his contribution to the mastermind leadership and so on, and give him the floor one time. Ed, how can we serve you, or what kind of ongoing relationship can we as a group have with Ed Bogle here?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah. Well, I'm giving it back.
I never go into a speaking engagement or anything like that with an, hey, here's what I need now. It's about, I give and it always comes back to me. So most of it right now is the pandemic changed my business for the better. Okay. Because I, like everybody else, got shut down. My business model, I spoke at conventions literally all over the world and ended up picking up a piece of business here and there and that kind of stuff. But that died with the pandemic, and it's not back yet. I don't know if anybody knows of big meetings and that kind of stuff, but help to me is finding places where I can plug in and use my entrepreneurial skills. And I have a whole training curriculum on entrepreneurship I've developed that I haven't done anything with. I'm looking to find some people that might be interested in helping me market that, an alliance partner or somebody that could, do something there. So in an interest of helping you, helping me, I would be more than willing to have private sessions with anybody in this group that wants one. I'll put together a little offering flyer on it, and I can do anywhere from 30 minutes to a couple hours worth of consultations on a one-on-one basis to help you think your way through all of that. So
awesome. Well, what we can do, this for those who haven't been here regularly, is this is being recorded. It will be in replay mode on the Be Connected platform, as well as it'll end up on our YouTube channel. So you can go back to it if you missed any part of it. And then in that description, Ed, if there's an offer or something, anything you want to provide there, I'll incorporate that into the details on the replay of this for people.
Yeah, I've got some detailed materials that I'll offer to you guys just for review, and then we can do some one-on-ones.
Great. And we also have a private Facebook group for those that aren't regular part of the group. And we can also put documents, PDFs, those kinds of things there for people's consumption. But that is, so join that Facebook group. It's Richardson Plano Networkers, and you can do that as well. Well, I appreciate it again. Everybody give Ed a virtual applause here. Appreciate
Thank you.
You're serving our community. Thank you, Jeff, for introducing us.